This is Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Welcome to the weekly Top 3, the top 3 things on our mind here at Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets for the week of April 27th, 2026. The weekly Top 3 is a regular segment on The Michael Dukes Show. The show broadcasts on both Facebook Live and YouTube Live, as well as via streaming audio from the show's website, weekdays from 6 to 8 a.m. I join Michael weekly in the first hour of Tuesday's show from 6:10 to 7 a.m. for a discussion between the two of us about our 3 issues. We post the podcast of our discussion following the show on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, also on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets website, as well as the project's page on national blog site, medium.com. You can find past episodes of the weekly Top 3 also at the same locations. Keep in mind that in addition to these podcasts, during the week, you can also follow and participate in the discussion with us of these and other issues affecting Alaska's fiscal and economic condition by following us on the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets Facebook page and through our posts on Twitter. This week, our top 3 issues are these. First, we explain why we believe the governor should veto and the legislature should uphold his veto of the defined benefits bill, assuming the bill passes the legislature in the first go-round. Second, we discussed both the signals the feds are sending on the LNG project and what federal involvement would mean for the state if they get involved in the LNG project. And third, we discussed the role we believe fiscal policy should be playing in this year's governor's race and our disappointment over why it isn't. And finally, a scheduling note. We will be off for the next 2 weeks traveling. We will return with the next edition of the weekly Top 3 on Tuesday, May 19th. And now, let's join Michael.
Get started here into the deep dive. And we start off with number 1, which is surely, without a fiscal plan, the governor will veto the defined benefits bill, won't he? First of all, don't call me Shirley. Second of all, will the governor will he veto the defined benefits plan? I don't know. They keep trying to make it easier, better, whatever. What say you, my friend?
Well, the defined benefits plan has been a goal of both House Majority Leader Chuck Kopp and various people in the Senate for the past couple of years. And they've kept trying. They got it through the House last year, got it over to the Senate, and the Senate's been working with it this session. I think Burt tried to lay down as many, uncommonly for him, tried to lay down as many stumbling blocks as he could, but it's cleared Senate Finance and it's headed and it's on the Senate floor. Was in its second reading yesterday, will be up for its third reading today and vote today. And given where the Senate's been on, the Senate as a whole has been on defined benefits, at least in terms of the statements from the leadership, one has to assume that it will pass the Senate today. Now, that's not the final. Senate Finance made a lot of changes to it, which actually brings into question whether there's a valid fiscal note and a valid actuarial study supporting the bill. But Senate made a lot of changes. Senate Finance made a lot of changes to it, and so it will have to go back over to the House for concurrence. If it's not concurred, it'll have to go to conference. So it's not out of the legislature yet, and possibly may not get out of the legislature. But if it does get out of the legislature, here's the question that I've been struggling with all along with all of these bills: the education bill that passed last year, the permanent bump in the K through 12 BSA, and now this legislation that would be a permanent change in in benefits, defined benefits going forward. My question basically is, how can you be doing this? How can you be making these long-term changes in the state's fiscal costs, in the state's fiscal structure, without a fiscal plan? I mean, if you look ahead, you look at the governor's, the OMB's 10-year plan, you look at anything that Leg Finance publishes, if you count the permanent fund dividend at the statutory levels, we've got huge deficits, 1.5 to $2 billion deficits, depending upon where spending levels are and depending upon where oil prices are, but huge deficits staring us in the face over the next 10 years and beyond. I mean, some people say, oh, just wait till the new oil production starts in. Well, given what oil taxes do, new production actually drives revenues from oil production down over the long term. So we're facing these huge deficits, and yet we keep layering on. We did this with the increase in the BSA. We keep layering on these structural cost increases going forward. Now, we get into these debates about year-to-year increases, like, throwing a one-time increase on the BSA or throwing a one-time increase on correction spending or whatever spending level we're doing. I mean, those have problems in and of themselves because we're in deficit years. But intentionally increasing the cost structure of the state with a bill that not only applies for the next year, but applies for, in perpetuity going forward, because you're changing the fundamental structure of the statutes. Intentionally doing that without having a fiscal plan in place is just, it's suicide. You're just putting yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into the long-term hole. Before early this year, the response of some before early this year was, well, the governor can't veto it. Theoretically, logically, can't veto this increased spending because the governor hasn't proposed a long-term fiscal plan. And indeed, he hadn't since the 2019 debacle, when he tried to achieve a fiscal plan through spending cuts that didn't succeed. Since that debacle, he really hadn't put forward a long-term fiscal plan in the subsequent years. But he did earlier this year. So when the governor, not that the legislature bought off on it, but at least the governor put one out there. So when the legislature says, hey, we want to increase costs permanently going forward, we want to increase this problem permanently going forward, not a year-to-year thing, but we just want to make it worse going forward. I think the governor has a legitimate basis on which to push back and say, I'm not going to approve that without a fiscal plan. I mean, you guys pass a fiscal plan, and now he can say, I've put one out there. You didn't like it. Come up with your own. But you guys pass a fiscal plan, and we'll start putting these things in the context of what we've done overall. But just layering on this additional spending on top of additional spending on top of additional spending permanently going forward, making what's already a horrible situation worse, layering that on top going forward, I think is just insane. And I think it gives the governor the perfect ability to push back and say, look, I'm going to, I'm not even going to get to the merits of this, although the governor might. I'm not even going to get to the merits of this. You can't pass another spending bill without having a permanent spending bill without having a fiscal plan in place. I'm not going to sign off on it and push it back on the legislature. And I doubt that there's the votes to override a veto on that basis. So surely he will do that, right? I mean, surely this is all, I could say John or Michael, surely, surely the governor's going to do this. And surely he's going to push back and say, look, without a long-term fiscal plan in place, we're not doing these permanent long-term spending increases.
Well, you would hope so. Again, because we are still feeling the pain of the last defined benefits program. And although the authors of the bill have assured us that, of course, we won't, it won't accumulate anymore. It won't do any of this. But all you have to do is look at the appropriate costs for the local communities and see that in some of the roadblocks that Stedman tried to throw up there, it includes increases from 22 to 24% for the municipalities to have to pay into the kitty on this. And for some of them, that's I think it was whatever it was, Sitka or Ketchikan, would have been a $500,000 increase per year. And they said that may not sound like much, but in a community of 8,500 people, it's a lot of money. And there's just no way that they could justify that. And I think that's the biggest thing. The Jeremy Bynum's in the chat room, and he talks about the problem with it becoming bound by the Constitution. And that's the problem with any of these defined benefits programs, is that once they're in law and they're locked in, then it's over. I mean, that's why we still have people who are on tier 1, 2, and 3 of the defined benefits program, because they're protected by a constitutional guarantee of the contract being honored. They just stopped adding new people to it. And so we could be on the hook for, I mean, the Reason Foundation said it would be almost $1 billion a year by the time, or within 10 years, it would be $1 billion additional within 10 years. That's a significant amount of money when we're already facing $1 billion a year deficit.
Yeah, I just don't see. I mean, separate and apart from the merits, people can argue about the merits about whether an increase in defined benefits will improve various personnel problems that we've got in the state, and we'd have arguments over that. But I just don't see a basis for continually increasing spending, layering on additional permanent spending. And, you know, Jeremy's point is, yes, it is permanent because it's constitutionally protected once it's adopted. But layering on additional permanent spending, I just don't see a basis for that until we have a fiscal plan in place. And frankly, you know, we're at the end of a two-year legislature, and so this won't have any effect on this legislature. But frankly, pushing back on things like that and saying, look, we can't adopt additional spending. We can't keep layering on additional spending until we have a fiscal plan. It brings some additional pressure on the legislature to come to grips with a fiscal plan, because you have a governor who says that I'm not going to layer on additional spending until we have a fiscal plan in place. And part of the legislature's response should be, well, I guess we need to have a fiscal plan. So there's a lot of reasons. The additional cost, the constitutional, the effect on the municipalities, all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of reasons to push back on it. But I think, to me, the ultimate reason is we can't keep layering on long-term increases in spending until we've come to grips with a fiscal plan. Now, if we've come to grips with a fiscal plan and we have a way of paying for it, and it's all within a spending cap, and we're going to force ourselves to have priorities coming out of this, then yeah, I mean, you can start considering proposals to layer on additional spending in the context of, you know, something that we've got defined. Until we have that defined, I just don't think it makes sense. I hope, surely the governor vetoes it, but I hope we don't get into a situation where he says, oh, well, you know, we got all these problems in the state in terms of employee retainage, and this is the solution to it. We're going to adopt this solution. And we just keep doing that. We just keep, like we did last year with the BSA, we just keep layering on these additional costs without a long-term fiscal plan in place.
Yeah, not to mention the new BSA increase discussion and everything else and all that. Rob Meyer says the majorities are behaving like he'll veto it. They're trying to rush it so they can get it to him soon enough that they'll be able to have a veto override before the end of session. And if I was the governor and I was going to stand tall and veto it, I think I'd hold on to it for that 30-day window that he has to sign it and wait for it to run out and then veto it and let them have to come back to him. But I would definitely, if I was the governor, well, you know what I would do. I would definitely veto the hell out of it. But we'll see where that goes. We're coming up on the break. Go ahead. Final thoughts, Brad.
Well, I was going to say, and then that puts, if he does veto within the window, and the legislature has a chance to consider it on override, then you put the pressure on the legislatures. How do you do that without having a fiscal plan in place? Particularly since the governor offered you a fiscal plan, you trash that. So if you don't have one, how do you as individual legislators justify your vote in favor of it?
The money will just appear, Brad. That's their plan. The money will just appear. I mean, that's the thing. If they're trying to get it in, to rush it so that they can get to again, if I was the governor, I would just sit on it. I mean, he's got like a 30-day window to sign it. I'd just sit on it till the end of the session and then veto it and then see what goes on from there. If they're really serious about coming back with it. Because again, why set it up and play into their hands at that point? I would let them 15 days while they're in session, excluding Sundays. So 20 days in the interim, says Jeremy. Well, I'd wait the 15 days. We're 28. What are we here? We are 28. So that's 2 plus 20. We're 22 days away from the end of the session.
Well, that was Rob's point, though, wasn't it? Rob's point was they're trying to get it through so that they get it to the governor so that he has to act on it while they're still in session. And they get a chance to override. And I'm horrible at head counts, but I would doubt that there's a majority or that there's the necessary vote, veto override in the legislature to override. Maybe there is, but maybe all of this is just positioning for the election cycle. People, trying to get people on the record about whether or not they support the defined benefits so that can then trigger, public employee unions to support or not support certain people. Maybe that's what this is all about. But it's just, from a policy standpoint, it's just horrible policy to keep layering on additional spending without having an overall plan in place.
Right. The deadline to transmit it to him is by Friday. That's the deadline to get it done before the end of session. Rob says takes 40 votes to override. We're counting about 33 votes in favor right now. So maybe this is more kabuki, political theater, where they want to be able to get everybody on the record and then they can try and beat the hell out of them during the election cycle. Did you see how they did not take care of you as an employee? Which again is another friend. If they get it through, great. If not, they've got a great weapon to beat people with in the election season. I don't know. We're playing games here with we got a multi-billion dollars worth of deficits over the next 10 years. And these people are continuing to just kind of play games with this kind of stuff, which I guess it shouldn't surprise me at this point. Shouldn't surprise me at all, but it is what it is. We can't seem to come to grips with the fact that we just don't have an infinite amount of money in the state, which seems to, it just seems like this is what these people think. Oh, well, if it's important, we'll pay for it. Another $153 million in BSA increases. And if we can't get it permanently, we'll take it as a one-time benefit. And, the BSA and the everything else, it's, we may have a little extra money on this Iranian thing, but when that slows down,
but we don't have extra money, Michael. What the Iranian thing is doing is pushing the deficit from $1.5 billion to $1.4 billion. That's the deal. There is no amount of additional money from oil realistically that's going to eliminate the deficit. And so when you think, we got additional money from Iran, we don't. All it does is reduce the amount of the deficits that we're running. And for people to think that that's, a surplus or that's spare or, as the Senate Finance Committee is doing, that justifies funding a bunch of capital spending that at the beginning of the session we said we can't do, but now all of a sudden at the end of the session we can do because we've got all this additional oil money. It's just, until we have a fiscal plan, it's just we're just digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, that's the thing. And eventually the music has to stop, right? Eventually the music will stop and there won't be any chairs left at all. And we'll all be standing around wondering where we're going to try and take a seat. And the legislators will have slowly, we saw Stevens and Hoffman, they're retiring. And then, a lot of these they'll retire and wander off in the pucker brush and they'll be like, see you, Lou. Here, you have to deal with it now. What are you going to do? Welcome back. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, in the weekly top 3 continues. We're on to number 2. We just can't get away from this stuff, can we? What signals are the Fed sending to us on the AK LNG project, Brad? What are they looking at here?
The most conversations I've had in the last week have been around what are the Feds up to? What's happening with the LNG project? We've got sort of these two worlds running in parallel or not running in parallel, just running in different levels. One is the state parallel, where we're debating property taxes, and we have the bill out of Senate Resources, and we have a bill that's a substitute bill that's being considered by House Resources, both of which take the governor's proposal of a volumetric tax, adopt that, but then come up with different tax levels for the volumetric tax. So we have this debate going on at the state level about whether whether we're going to make changes in the property tax, and whether the governor's going to how the governor's going to deal with that if the legislature comes to agreement before the end of the session on those changes. And then at a different plane, on a different level, we have the federal discussion going on. We had Trump a week ago, excuse me, Trump a week ago issue an executive order invoking the Defense Production Act with respect to LNG projects and other energy projects in general. That invocation of the Defense Production Act sets up authorities in the federal government substantial authorities in the federal government to provide either financial support to given projects, or at the extreme, as was done in World War II under the War Powers Act, which was a predecessor to the Defense Production Act, at the extreme, potentially, have the federal government taking over the project and building the project as a national security project. So, and then we had Chris Wright, Secretary of Energy Chris Wright, talk about that a week ago in a hearing before Senate Energy, in which he said his highest priority was the Alaska gas line project, and that he was, there wasn't a day that went by that he wasn't focusing on it, and getting fairly specific. I mean, he said the LNG, the gasification facility on Kenai sort of paid for itself. It wasn't tough to finance. What was really tough to finance was the pipeline, creating the impression, when coupled with Trump's Defense Production Act executive order, creating the impression that maybe the feds were thinking about getting involved in the pipeline, separate from the LNG facility, the export facility, and separate from the upstream facility to deal with CO2, the stripping facility up in the North Slope. So we have sort of these parallel universes going on, and I take the federal discussion seriously. I mean, Trump issues a lot of executive orders, so that's not altogether bizarre in and of itself. But talking about invoking the Defense Production Act, and then Chris Wright's testimony coming right behind it before Senate Energy, talking specifically about the Alaska LNG project, I take that as the feds, seriously considering doing something. So, the conversations I've had this past week is, how does all that play out? And one scenario that potentially you can see coming together is letting the state sort of have its shot at trying to bring the project together, with Dunleavy's proposal to go the alternative volumetric tax on property tax, and seeing if that can get through the legislature, and seeing if that then is enough of a financial reduction in the cost of the project to bring forward investors and get the project put together privately. That's sort of the feds sort of sitting there waiting and seeing whether the state gets its act together. And then if it doesn't, or if it does, if it passes, the legislature ends up passing the law, but with a volumetric tax that's too high in the judgment of somebody, that doesn't make the project economic, then the feds coming in behind that and saying, okay, we'll just take the project over. One piece of this that I've spent a lot of time digging into as I've had these conversations over the past week is what exactly does the Defense Production Act do for the project? Well, it creates a lot of authorities in the feds to do things such as invest in the project. I mean, that's the DPA is what Trump's used for the government to invest in a lot of different mining and other projects so far in the country. It's what he's using as the basis for his consideration of buying Spirit Airlines currently. It gives the federal government a lot of authority to do things, but it doesn't give them money. The money has to come from congressional appropriations. And the DPA it has an account that is managed by the Department of Defense, Defense Production Act, managed by the Department of Defense, because it's supposed to be a national security account, has an account in which there's about $1.9 billion that's been deposited currently, has been appropriated currently. Now, under the law, the federal government isn't, the administration can't carry over more than $750 million in unauthorized or spare DPA funds. Can't carry over $750 million from year to year. Is not supposed to carry over more than $750 million from year to year. The law provides that if it does, if it has more than $750 million in the account at the end of a given year, that it has to redeposit the excess amount back into the general fund, back into the general treasury.
Like the sweep and the reverse sweep in the state, right? Are we supposed to sweep it out, right? But do they?
Oh, well, although there are, I mean, Congress can authorize, can suspend that law. And in the DPA, there's authority to suspend, by executive order, to suspend the law. So you can sort of guess that maybe the $1.9 billion isn't going back. The excess isn't going back, that Trump will hang on to it. But it's only $1.9 billion, and it's $1.9 billion for all of the projects he's talked about in not yet committed funds, DPA funds. So if, for example, he wanted to spend $500 million on Spirit Airlines, and by Spirit Airlines, that's $500 million out of the $1.9 billion that's currently sitting in the account, that all of a sudden becomes encumbered and no longer is available for other projects. 1.9 in the context of the Alaska project, $1.9 billion is not a lot. Now, you could, if it were used to support a loan, then you risk adjust the amount. Let's say you wanted to commit, $40 billion let's say you wanted to commit $20 billion, half of the cost of the project in the form of a loan. Well, the accounting for how that affects the DPA account is you risk adjust the loan, how much you're really putting at risk. So if you say there's only a 10% risk of default, then it's only $2 billion. Or if you say there's only a 5% risk of default, then it's only $1 billion. So you can sort of play with those numbers and get somewhat significant commitments, even off the back of a $1.9 billion DPA account. But the DPA account is a limitation. Trump would have to go to Congress. He can't create any more out of it. So Trump would have to go to Congress to get additional funding into the DPA account if you were going to make a bigger commitment to the Alaska pipeline. So I can sort of see what Wright was talking about. I mean, if the administration had $50 billion in the DPA account, and they'd already taken care of everything else they wanted to do, and it was just sort of sitting there, then okay, we'll just go build a pipeline. Right. But with the limitation of the funding on the DPA side, that creates a real limitation on what they can do with respect to exercising the DPA Act. One other thing that I think is interesting here, they can condition under the DPA, you can condition the loans. So if, for example, the legislature passed a volumetric tax, let's assume Dunleavy either signed it or Dunleavy vetoed it, and the legislature overrode, and so that volumetric tax is now on the books from the state standpoint. The federal government can come in and say, well, we're gonna loan, or we're gonna invest. Well, if they invested, then it's federal property, non-taxable by the state, so that takes care of that problem. Or we're going to loan, or we're going to provide purchase credits to help private loans on the project. But the federal government can say, and we're going to condition those loans on the state collecting no more than X in terms of property tax.
Right.
And so you've got, as I say, you've got these parallel tracks out there right now on the project that are, you don't know where they're going to land. I mean, to some degree, at the end of all these conversations I had during the week, to some degree, I came to the conclusion that what the legislature is doing right now is engaging in kabuki theater. They're acting as if they have some authority to step in here and say, oh, we're going to impose these volumetric taxes on the pipeline, knowing full well that the federal government is going to come in and wipe those out if the federal government decides to get involved. And so, yeah, I mean, let's just pile the taxes on, because at the end of the day, we could blame it on the federal government for wiping them out. So the pipeline the project is sort of progressing through all this, but it's progressing oddly, and we're just sort of, I think we're just sort of waiting around to waiting for the federal shoe to drop out there at some point, and whether and then waiting on whether the 1.9 billion or the 1.5 billion or whatever the heck they've got in the DPA account at any given point in time, whether that's going to be sufficient to allow them to have a big enough shoe to bring the project together. But it's interesting to watch these parallel tracks sort of wander along and see if they're going to ultimately result in a project, or we're just running in circles here and entertaining ourselves.
Yeah, the Rob Myers again in the chat room, kind of certifying and confirming what you're talking about. Certain people here are freaking out that if Trump nationalizes the project, leaving us with no tax on it at all. And again, that's the thing. They could put whatever tax they want on it, but the limitations from the feds, if they come in under DPA, could change the whole scenario. They may not have the money immediately at hand to do the whole project and do whatever, but they could definitely put some hooks into it and change the whole dynamic of it at any moment.
Yeah, somebody said during the week, well, Trump will just go to the Congress and get additional authorization. Well, I don't think that's as easy as you think it is. I mean, I doubt if the Democrats would give you the vote in the Senate for the additional appropriation, and if they don't, then what to overcome the filibuster, and then if they don't, the only way to ram it through is through a reconciliation bill. And they're already running one reconciliation bill right now, that if you were going to do that, you would think you would put the money in that reconciliation bill to go do it. So there's a lot of moving parts out there that are, from an observer standpoint, are fun to watch, probably from the perspective of those inside the project, horrifying.
Yeah, and we're still working on 10-year-old numbers, 12-year-old numbers. I mean, you said 40 billion for the project, and we still don't know what the modern day cost equivalent is. We have no idea, right? It was 44 billion back in 2015, 2016, whatever it was. And we still that we're working on 10-year-old numbers, and we're pretending like we know what it's actually going to cost at this point, because Glenn Farn won't cough up the goods.
Well, and whatever we think it's going to cost, it's going to cost more. I mean, one of the conversations was, well, let's assume it's $60 billion. Well, you can't, because Glenn Farn has no execution experience, right? I mean, they've hired a general contractor that does have some execution experience, but no one has execution experience on this size of a project in this type of environment. So whatever you think the costs are going, just like TAPS, whatever you think the costs are going to be, they're going to be more. And then the question about the DPA is, well, do you have enough to cover the more? You may be able to force it, but are you going to have enough to cover the cost overruns when they come down?
They don't even have the now or the old number coverage, let alone the new coverage. They don't have enough money laying around there. That was kind of eye-opening to find out in what you're talking about there. That's what gets me, is that I don't know. I just don't know what we're going to do until we actually have a hard number. I mean, how can we really make any decisions, taxation or otherwise, until we have some kind of hard number? And even if it was under an NDA or whatever, but Glenn Farn won't even step up to give any of that info. It's kind of difficult to make the decision. Like I said, I really want this thing to go through. I really want this to happen, but until we have some solid numbers, or at least a wild ass guess to work with, we just don't even know where we're going to end up at.
Well, you sort of in this parallel universe, you sort of assume, or I sort of assume, that the federal government knows what at least the costs that came out of the work that's been done thus far by Glenn Farn, at least what those costs are. And so when Chris Wright talks about the difficult piece of it being the pipeline, the difficult piece to finance being the pipeline, that's sort of where the bulk of the unknown costs are. That, and if you include the upstream cleaning plant, stripping plant as part of the pipeline. That's really where the bulk of the costs are. LNG plants, plus or minus are sort of defined in terms of costs. Doing it in the Cook Inlet is going to be a little bit different. You got ice and you got issues around that. But we've built enough LNG plants. The industry is now built enough LNG plants in the lower 48 to sort of have those costs within mind. And so when Chris Wright talks about the fact that the pipeline is the difficult part, it may be that the federal government does know the costs, and those costs are difficult to finance. Cost plus the uncertainty of the cost overruns is difficult to finance. It's one of those things. I mean, people started out in the week saying DPA. Well, that means Trump can just build it. Don't worry about it. Well, the funding behind the DPA is a big issue. I mean, Trump doesn't have unlimited funds. Invoking the DPA doesn't give him unlimited funds, and so that's a big issue and a limiting factor in what the federal government can do. And so I think there's just a lot of moving pieces out there. One more moving piece is the commitments that Japan and Korea have made in connection with the tariffs. Early on in the Trump administration, they made these investment commitments, and at least the Korea portion, I think it's the Korea portion, has been used to some degree with respect to specific projects in the U.S. And so they've sort of worked out the roadmap of how you do that, at least in part. But then the tariffs got blown up by the Supreme Court, and so we really haven't heard about these trade-offs in the past several months since the Supreme Court blew up the tariffs. And so there's an uncertainty even with respect to whether those monies, to the extent there was any certainty that they were ever going to be available, there's an uncertainty with respect to those monies. So you've got all sorts of conflicting motivations. People want to do this project with Hormuz, with the Iran war. There's an increased desire to do the project for supply security reasons. Alaskans want to do the project, but then the money is sort of floating around out there in terms of how it gets financed. A lot of moving pieces. You can sort of piece through a track of how it could get done, but every time you start going down one track, you hit the stumbling block. On the DPA, you hit the finance, the amount of funds, appropriated funds, right, as you go down that. So,
yeah, it's going to be. We're going to be living in interesting times. Rob says this morning's Resources Committee meeting will be a deep dive into the economics and how the Senate version of the bill makes it worse. So, I mean, that'll be interesting. And then what did Rick just say? UAE just quit OPEC. That's a big deal because they want to produce more. OPEC was holding them back. That'll be an interesting thing to see what happens there too. But again, this gas line thing, I know everybody's like, oh, Trump's going to come in and save it, but there's got to be the money. And it's not just like he goes down to an ATM and withdraws it. Again, he's got to get Congress on board. And I just don't think he's winning any friends and winning friends and influencing people right now.
And reconciliation gives the Republicans the ability to blow stuff through, but they've not got it in the current reconciliation bill. So, and they're running out of time. I mean, if you look at the polls, they're going to lose the Republicans lose the House, potentially lose the Senate. So they're running out of time to get stuff to jam stuff through.
Well, we'll see what happens here. Brad Keithley continues with us. The weekly top three. Number 3 of the weekly top 3 is: what role will fiscal policy play in this year's governor's race? And we're seeing some discussions, and I'm seeing some of the same old recycled stuff. This is what Shelley Hughes had to say in a poll that she did among her constituency late last week.
Shelley Hughes here. I asked you recently a simple question. What's the biggest issue facing our state right now? And thank you to everyone who responded. 2 things came up again and again: the cost of living and the permanent fund dividend. And many of you said they're connected. When groceries, housing, everyday expenses go up, families feel it immediately. For many households, the PFD helps. And I hear you. The pressure is real for a lot of Alaskans right now. We're going through your responses and seeing what people are saying the most. So I want to keep the conversation going. What's been the biggest thing driving up your costs this past year? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you.
The biggest thing driving up my cost, Brad, is government. I mean, I'm just saying, it's government. But I mean, this is part of the question, right? I mean, what is driving the governor's race? What do you say?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Shelley's tried to downplay the PFD issue in her campaign thus far, and it was interesting to see the results of her own poll putting the PFD as one of the top two issues. Now, it's just Shelley's constituency and the people who took the time to respond, and so it's a fairly narrow, self-selecting poll, and I wouldn't put it up as a measure of statewide sentiment broadly. But it's interesting that even though Shelley has tried to downplay it, the PFD issue pops up to the top of her poll. Here's the thing that really bothers me with Shelley and with all of the candidates that are out there right now. They're all taking sort of single shot on fiscal issues. They're sort of taking single shot positions. So Bernadette's out there strong on behalf of the PFD, sort of wavers sometimes, but it comes back strong. It's currently in one of its strong streaks. And so you've got candidates who are focusing on single issues. Nat Hertz, for those who read the Northern Journal, Nat Hertz's Northern Journal, he's done some polls of the candidates on how much education spending should we be making, how much should the PFD be, what should we be doing with respect to oil taxes, all single shot issues that the candidates have sort of taken positions on. And they've been inconsistent positions. I mean, some of the candidates said in response to the poll on the PFD, oh, we need statutory PFDs. And then on the poll on oil taxes, which is one of the lowest hanging fruits out there to get you the alternative revenues you need to get back to full PFDs, statutory PFDs, on oil taxes, some of those same candidates who were strong on the PFD opposed changes in oil taxes. The lowest hanging fruit that's sitting out there to get alternative revenues to pay for whatever spending levels we want to use out there. So you really don't have any candidate out there that has a consistent position, well thought out position on fiscal policy. And I'm starting to be concerned that during the course of the campaign, we're not going to have that. We're going to have candidates who take strong positions on single issues like Bernadette on the PFD, and strong positions with respect to various aspects of fiscal policy.
Right.
But we're not going to have a candidate who thinks through the whole thing and puts forward a solution so that when they are elected, or if they are elected, they have a mandate on which to govern. I mean, one more time to go back to the first segment, we're facing huge deficits. 30% of the budget is in deficit over the currently going forward over the next 10 years. More than 30% of the budget's in deficit. Huge deficits. And to resolve those, or to resolve any of the issues that people talk about, more education funding, defined benefits, to resolve those, we've got to resolve that fiscal issue. But we have none of that. And everybody's saying, well, Dunleavy's been a failure. Dunleavy never put out a plan. And we're gonna get our act together finally with the next governor. Well, none of the gubernatorial candidates are out there with a full fiscal policy issue or with a full fiscal policy proposal. They're all out there with these single shot, PFD, pro PFD, or pro whatever policies that don't add up to an overall fiscal policy solution. So it's depressing when you start thinking about where we're going. I mean, right, we've all been depressed by the last several years when we haven't gotten to a resolution on the issue. People have said, well, Dunleavy's going to be termed out at some point. We'll get a governor in there that will finally address it. We don't have any candidates that are even proposing on how to address the issue holistically.
How serious,
they're just running in circles.
How serious do you think candidates are that press for the full PFD yet are not willing to put forward a true fiscal plan? I mean, how serious are they at this point?
They're
I mean, that's kind of what I get the feeling of, is that you talk for a full PFD, yet you have no plan for cuts, no plan for new revenues, no plan for, again, it's a lot of chatter, but not a lot of actual substance in how you're going to get there from here.
Yeah, and people say, well, we'll just cut. I mean, Bernadette from time to time says, well, we'll cut government down. 35%. We're in 35% deficit. More than $1 billion. The size of the deficit is plus or minus the size of the PFD cut. So the size of the PFD cut is plus or minus $1.5 billion, trending up to $2 billion over the next 10 years. That's the size of the deficit. It's more than a third of the size of government spending. So when you say we're going to cut, but you don't have any idea where you're going to cut, we've been there. We did that in 2019 with Dunleavy. It failed. We couldn't even get 16 legislators behind him to uphold the cuts that he wanted to make. So that's not going to work. And you don't have any alternative plan. I mean, you're against oil taxes. Okay, well, that's the low hanging fruit on the revenue side. What is your plan? We don't have any candidate. Shelley was on the fiscal policy working group. JKT was co-chair of the fiscal policy working group. Even they don't have full scale plans for how they resolve the fiscal gap.
Nope. It's a challenge and it's problematic, but this is where we sit. And in a field of 19, you think somebody would have a full fiscal plan, but it's just not. It's not happening right now. This whole thing is it's just astonishing to watch how we've got all these candidates who talk about, oh, I want the full PFD, but their answer is, well, we'll create a sunset commission, or we'll sell Alaska land, or we'll create new resources. We'll develop our resources, and these are all, I mean, some of these are great things, don't get me wrong, but again, you're talking about long-term revenue development versus we have a problem next year. And we have a problem for every year for the next 5 years. So if you've got a 5-year tail on what you got going on, how do we survive from here to there?
Well, and it's not, I mean, Michael, Shelley is, I'll pick on Shelley today because she's the one that did the video. But Shelley's plan is, we need to develop our resources. We need to develop all these resources that we have. And we need to develop low cost energy, and that will bring in additional investment, and everything will be okay. Well, Shelley, additional investment doesn't add to the state's revenue base. We don't have any tax structure that from all these additional industrial development that you visualize coming on board doesn't develop any revenues for the state. And additional oil development, which some people talk about, oh, that's going to save us. Additional oil development. I mean, look at the numbers, people. I've published these several times in the Friday column in the Landmine. Look at the numbers. What happens to oil taxes as you make additional, as the industry makes additional development? Oil taxes go down because of the way the credits are working. They drive oil taxes down, not just down as a percentage, but down in absolute terms. They widen the deficit. So, people who talk about we're going to work our way out of this through additional investment, or we're going to work our way out of this through additional oil production, they're not paying attention to how this stuff works. And it really is frustrating from the standpoint of, considering, do I support this candidate or that candidate? Is there even a basis on talking to this candidate? Right. Because they don't have a plan. It's just, there's no one out there that's really bringing it all together. And I'm not sure we have any legislative candidates who are bringing it all together either. But the great push has been, we'll get a governor in here who's going to do all this. It's not
all by themselves without the help of the legislature. They're going to do all this. They're going to bend the legislature to their will and get it.
But bend them to what will? I mean, Bernadette says we'll cut spending by 35%. No, you're not. I mean, we've been there. We've been down this road. Not even conservative, ultra conservative Republican legislators were willing to back up the administration on the level of cuts. And those weren't 35% cuts. Those were about 15% cuts.
Right. Or Rob says, or alternatively, just get the permanent fund to earn more.
Well, the permanent fund should be earning more, but it can't earn enough to close $1 billion, $1.5 billion deficit
Well,
every year.
Unless we stop paying the $1 billion to manage it and we just start taking the, we might be able to find some. But again, you're right. Roll your eyes. That's exactly where we're at. I mean, we just don't have the candidate with the serious plan. I mean, I like some of the candidates, but in the end, there is no real true fiscal plan, to put together. And yeah, Rob's right. We saw Ben try to bring it together and we saw how that worked out for him, right? Ben tried to bring together a fiscal plan and immediately got stabbed full, in the front and the back on the way out of the door. So yeah, it's a tough situation. We're down to just under 2 minutes here, Brad. Give you time to lay final thoughts out there.
Well, I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, so I'm going to miss the end game. A big segment of the end game on the legislature, and it'll be fun to watch. I don't know how it all comes together at the end, and I'm going to miss everybody sort of getting their gubernatorial candidates, their plans more defined. So I'll come back in 2 weeks refreshed and ready, and be prepared to talk about how everybody screwed up in the meantime when I'm back. But
yeah.
There's a lot that's going to go on in the next period, none of which is very well defined.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even have, most of the candidates don't even have a running mate at this point. I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen when this is all said and done. I guess Shelley's supposed to announce hers this week, but I mean, we've got 19 candidates out there. We've got 3 candidates that have got running mates at this point, and I'm just wondering, how serious are we if we don't have a running mate now, if we don't have a fiscal plan now, if we don't have, I mean, it's a mess. It's an absolute gargantuan, just poo parade from start to finish. And nobody is being serious about this at this point. But Brad doesn't care because Brad's going to go out and enjoy some great music and history and everything else. So Brad, we appreciate you coming out, my friend. Thank you so much for what you do and for bringing this to us. I think most of us will miss you here over the next 2
Michael,
weeks.
It's fun to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'll see you in 2 weeks, all refreshed and ready to go again.
Yeah, you'll be ready. You'll be like, yeah, let's dive into it. And we'll just be beat down. We'll just be like, oh, my God. You stepped away at the perfect moment to not watch the train wreck. As
exactly.
You could see the train wreck was coming, and Brad's just like, no, peace, I'm out. Sorry. I'll be back after it's happened, and we'll see.
That's right.
Here. All right. Well, thank you, Brad. Appreciate it, my friend. Thanks for being part of it today.
Thanks as always, Michael. Well, that's a wrap for another week's edition of the weekly top 3 from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Thank you again for joining us. Remember that you can find past episodes on our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Substack pages, and keep track of us during the week on Facebook and Twitter. And again, please note that we will be off for the next 2 weeks traveling. We will return with the next edition of the weekly top 3 on Tuesday, May 19th. This has been Brad Keithley, Managing Director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We look forward to you joining us again on the next edition of the weekly top 3.